by a team that I was leading. It was a labor market assessment. We were told that there was no economic growth in Zimbabwe, and it wasn't true. We went around and found a lot of kind of resilient enterprises that had been forced to work maybe in different ways. We found a lot of dynamism, even despite the kind of complicated political conditions at that time. And this graphic kind of represents the different types of entrepreneurs we found. And I'm going to now show the next slide, because this is kind of the, sorry, we're going to go to slideshow. I'll show you the next one. Yeah. So look at this. The idea is that you have different levels of risk, and you have different formats in which you work, so that you may be kind of forced into entrepreneurship. You may be making an active decision, and you'll hear from somebody who did that today, to become an entrepreneur. There are different levels of risk taking, and then there are different levels of security based on sort of how you end up working, even once you are an entrepreneur. And one of the biggest differences we found was, who are your customers? So we found, people that were selling goods in open air markets and selling retail to individuals. And then we found people that were sort of business to business models. We found a big difference in entrepreneurs that would sell to multiple clients versus those were what were called captive contractors. So we kind of mapped this all out. And you see the arrows here? These arrows are sort of trying to show a pathway towards either employment or successful entrepreneurship. And I guess that's one of the questions that we're wrestling with in this session. And we're looking to our entrepreneurs to help us figure it out. The idea is, can you really, as an external agent, push somebody towards success as an entrepreneur or towards employment? Or is it up to the entrepreneurs to find their way? And is there a middle ground? How can we support entrepreneurs? There are many programs out there these days providing kits and tools. Some provide training, some provide credit. One of the things we were trying to say with this framework is that not all entrepreneurs are the same. Depending on where you are, who you serve, what market you're in, what your background is, the needs may be very, very different. And so we can't just call something an entrepreneurship program. We actually might want to look more at economic sectors, or we might want to look at financial products. So on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Esther, who's been working for quite some time with entrepreneurs. Hold on, let me stop my screen share. And Esther is going to moderate our discussion. She has some questions for our entrepreneurs. And when she's done, she's going to open it up for discussion among the wider group. And do stay tuned at the end. I wanted to announce a small group that is forming. It will be a French-speaking group to continue along this pathway of discussing entrepreneurship. And in the main BEPSE webinar series, we're going to move on to one of our other topics for the next webinars. But there will be a small group that's going to continue going deeper into this topic. So there you go. Thank you. Over to you, Esther.
Thank you, Lara, and thank you for taking us back to the last sessions. I'm so happy to be here. Lovely to see everyone. It's evening here in Kenya, and I understand it's quite early in the morning in some countries. And so good morning to those who are starting their morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the rest of us who are just about to end our day. So I'm really happy to be here. And as we start, I would love us not to be in different groups. Let's all consider ourselves entrepreneurs. They say all humans are entrepreneurs, not because all of us are going to start businesses or anything, but because all of us actually have the desire to create things. It's part of our DNA. And so even as we stay here, as we have these conversations, you're either an entrepreneur at heart or you're an entrepreneur in practice. So today, and this leads us to our questions. Questions like, should every young unemployed person become an entrepreneur? Or do entrepreneurs really need more training? So these two entrepreneurs who are present here are just going to demystify the process of entrepreneurship using their own narratives. And we hoped that we will be more raw and cut and totally unedited as we share our truths and our journeys. Here today, we actually have Emmanuel Achapa, who has described entrepreneurship as a lonely journey, coming straight from chemist and all the way into becoming a trader. And he's here to actually demystify entrepreneurship. We also have Lydia Kemunto, who believes, Dr. Lydia Kemunto, who believes that the space needs a lot more Africans for us to be able to understand the African landscape. Therefore, the decision-making table needs to have more Africans on the table. And so by listening to their narratives of this tool, we hope that we will discover some of the causes of success in this perspective, and equally to discover some of the pain points that we may have missed either as people practicing away from entrepreneurship, but through learning from this tool, we may actually see something that we may have missed in their journey. So just to go straight, I'm going to start with Emmanuel, because your story is one of those that is mentioned and was mentioned from the previous one about those who were pushed into entrepreneurship involuntarily, right? So Emmanuel Achapa is a chemist who turned trader, is a YP2LE fellow, and is a founder of Unit Group Limited, a digital solutions marketing and branding company, and is currently the executive director of Nawiri, which works in sexual reproductive health rights and space, and is also a tech enthusiast and passionate about mentorship. So Emmanuel.
Yes.
As you tell us about what you do and your journey, I would love that you also tell us about your defining moment that made you actually decide to be an entrepreneur, and what have you actually learned along the way?
Thank you, Esther, and thank you everyone for joining this conversation. I'm absolutely honored to be here. First, I've been introduced. Emmanuel Achapa is my name. Just to mention quickly, I have been in this journey now for about 12 years. But first of all, I'd like to disuse the idea that entrepreneurship is something that it's a flipping point. It's not a moment. A lot of things build up to the decision to either go into entrepreneurship or not. But basically, after campus in 2018, I worked for about five years, different sectors. I worked in a research institution. I worked for an advertising company, and then I worked for a marketing agency. Then I worked for a blue chip company, which is BEPSE. And then after that, I went back to agency business. And all the while, you get to learn a number of things. You learn how to run business. You also learn how not to run business. You learn mistakes that you need to avoid. You pick up, a few strengths here. You build your social capital in the process, and that means network. Then, of course, 5 years down that line, I decided, you know what? I think it's time to give a solution to one of the challenges that I met in the process of working for these other organizations. So, and around 2015, I got into entrepreneurship. My first company being Unit Group Limited. And what we do actually, which we've done since then, is helping young organizations to build a brand, to build brand utility, to build brand equity, because brand equity is the ultimate that you can ever have of any business. And I will explain what brand equity is a little later. So now, the reason why I actually got into entrepreneurship was something that I picked up when I worked for agencies. Now, there are a lot of young people who get into business or want to get into business or entrepreneurship for that matter. However, the path is never defined, especially the path of creating the brand that then gives you value, both to the client and to self in terms of earnings. So the bigger agencies will never pick on the young or small businesses. And the reason is simple. The small entities will not be able to pay the big agencies. Yet, the big agencies have the benefit of experience, they have the benefit of longevity, they have the benefit of skilled staff, superiority in delivery, commitment, they have the running capital to boot, but they can't help the smaller entities. And so in trying to help the small organizations to grow, then we started a unit group limited, and that's what we still do. We grow, we work with young organizations and then grow with them over a lifetime towards basically building brand equity and brand value. So that's generally the journey. Now about 6 years into business with the unit group. And just last year, I ventured into social entrepreneurship, working in the sexual reproductive health space. And that was actually necessitated by the need that I saw in the society. So that's basically it for now, as we start.
Okay, thank you for that very lovely introduction and just, leading us into the journey of why you started Unit Group, and that you say it was not a moment. It was actually a lot of things that accumulated to you deciding to become an entrepreneur. Now, before we dive into the question, I would love to introduce Dr. Lydia Kemunto, founder and CEO of 8B Education, on a mission to strengthen Africa's human capital by equipping the continent's future leader by providing affordable loans so that they can actually access education. You have a very strong feeling on Africans need to be at the table for any change or any impact to actually happen. And this I believe to be a very, very noble cause to bring Africans to the decision making table. As you share your journey, do share, why did you feel this was necessary from your experience? I mean, you have worked in international organizations, and so you have witnessed. So do please, as you introduce yourself, do let us know why this was necessary to do this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Esther. And thank you so much, Lara and Jack, for organizing this session. And it was really interesting listening to Emmanuel and his journey. And I think the journey to entrepreneurship starts at so many different points. And I think what's amazing is that you are recognizing that in that lovely diagram that you started with, Lara, that there are people who are already demonstrating the potential for going out there and doing different things independently, seeing the change that they would like to see, but doing so within different structures. So my story, Esther, actually doesn't start in the UN, even if the immediate place where the journey starts a long time ago. The journey starts initially with me growing up with a father who had ambitions of studying abroad and never finding the money to do so. As a result of that, on our bookshelf at home, we had the prospectuses of the various universities he had either applied to or gotten offers to, but couldn't afford. So those were like the vestiges of the dreams he could never fulfill. So that's one aspect of it. But the other was that I became really lucky to win a series of scholarships, one of which enabled me to go to something called the United World Colleges, where young people were encouraged to think about big ideas that they wanted to help solve. And while there, so I'm gonna give you a journey of the little bits and pieces that lead me to where I am. While there, I was part of something called World Voices, and that was young people talking about global understanding in all its shapes and forms. And I took that with me when I went to Cornell University for undergrad, another place where I was really lucky I call it winning a lottery, because getting one of those scholarships is like winning a lottery, but I was really lucky to win one of those. And I took World Voices with me there. While I was there, the HIV/AIDS epidemic was becoming a big thing in Kenya. I had cousins who got infected and people were dying. And so I got into HIV activism. journalism. And so Youth Against AIDS is an organization that I started back then, and that morphed into something that actually exists today, that is called Youth Force, which was basically, young people at international HIV/AIDS conferences calling for what this group is calling for, which is youth participation in policymaking, even if at that point that was related to HIV and AIDS. And then I got into formal employment at that point and, worked for a global organization and then worked at the UN. While I was at the UN Population Fund at the time, I was working on the issue of women's and children's health, particularly fistula. What I was doing that I now know to be intrapreneurship was exactly that, job crafting within a really big entity that is a super tanker. You don't really get it to do what you want, but within your little domain, you can really do interesting things if you have, a chief of section or someone higher up who is supportive of you. So then I started, what I think is intrapreneurship, but in a manner that would actually serve me a lot later in interesting ways within the UN Population Fund. Did similarly when I was very fortunate to work at the WHO. And then I went for further graduate studies. And when I did, I started something else called, basically it stays now as a think tank on how countries think about human rights abuses in post-conflict context. Again, that was an act of entrepreneurship, recognizing there is a space here within a university setting. There are people over there and over here who are working on the same thing. They're not talking. I created the space by which they talk to each other and share information. Really simple things like that. But all that was setting a stage for me realizing that I could actually be solving this problem outside the existing structures. The big change for me, and I think Emmanuel is absolutely right, it isn't one moment, it's a series of changes. But a big moment for me starts when I struggled to finance part of my graduate education. And then I realized I'm back to the beginning of my father's prospectuses on my bookshelf, where, these are the things he couldn't do because he couldn't afford it. And that made the issue of financing for African students in global universities something that I kept in my parking lot. And when I went back to the UN, one of the issues that I kept noticing, the way they talk about confirmation bias, once you have an issue in your head, everything you see is confirming of the issue. So when I go back to work, what I'm finding is I'm in rooms where there are not as many Africans as there could be given the issues under discussion. Why are there not enough Africans in those rooms? When you dig under, you realize the people are hired from a couple of universities. There are not enough Africans in those universities. Why are there not enough Africans in those universities? Did they not get into the universities? Actually, you find that they do get into these universities. They just don't have the money to attend. And that's where I decided to solve. I decided to solve the financing issues, to exit the policy rooms that I was so fortunate to be in. And as I said, I had won so many lotteries to get there, but to realize that the change that I needed to be making was elsewhere. It was in the plumbing that leads to the pipeline of the people in those rooms. And that's how when I finally gathered the courage, because Esther, it is a courageous act to leave a job at the UN where your mother is going to get upset at you, and start something entirely outside of it. But when I did and get that courage, what I knew I needed to do, the thing that I hadn't been able to escape, is this need to solve the financing for African students in global universities. And that's where I am, Esther. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
Wow, amazing, amazing. I mean, it does, one can call it as an act of sacrifice, leading from a state of comfort to a state of uncertainty of entrepreneurship. And no wonder you do need a lot of courage to be able to take that, leap into the next level. So what was your, of course, you have explained the necessity and the reason why it is important to form the organization that you did form. But I would love you to elaborate further on why it is actually important to have more Africans in those rooms.
So the way policy works, I'll start with policy, but this is true across all spaces, is that what emerges is the sum total of the views of the people in the room. And the reason why we care about diversity, the reason we care about inclusion is that it brings to the table other lived experiences that make the outcomes of the deliberations that then become the piece of paper that says this is how we think about issue X. It makes that process richer and more inclusive of a broader range of experiences. It's not any different from wanting more young people involved in youth-facing policies. It's really not very different, or wanting women to be in leadership positions. It brings a lived experience that is different from the mainstream experience into the room and makes the outcome more reflective of or looking like the world does. And I think that's why I care about it, that in my view, Africa has not been an equal player on the global stage. Africa is the place that we save and rescue and act upon and experiment on, but Africa has so much potential, right? Ability is evenly spread globally, but opportunity is not. So Africa's place in that system is not reflective of its potential. It's reflective of the opportunities that African persons have been able to get. And so my ambition, which won't be realized in an annual report at the end of a year, this is like a 30, 40-year timeframe, is how do we change the place that Africa occupies in the global imagination? We change that place by having a critical mass of Africans in all spaces where, ambitious Africans can be. One of the analogies that someone shared with me, and I find myself repeating time to time again, someone who was a president of a big, top 5 American foundation, shared with me that he finds that when you have Latin Americans or individuals from the subcontinent in global spaces, nobody questions why they're there. Or how they got there, because we take it for granted. There's so many smart young Indians from the subcontinent who are creating the future of cloud computing and becoming the next Sundar Pichai. We actually don't think the same about the African continent. We think it's a place with scarcity. There isn't enough of them. So when anybody leaves, oh my God, it's brain drain. There is not enough where you came from, go back, go back. And that mind frame just needs to shift, because there's so many of them where we came from. If only it wasn't by virtue of lottery that we are able to get these opportunities, if we could systematize the ability for people to get the financing they need to either build, the enterprises they want to build, but in my case, to be able to realize their academic and other potential by being connected to global universities. And now it's becoming a lot easier, Esther, because now a lot of premium education is becoming available online, forced by COVID, but will have such a positive knock-on effect on the capacity of ambitious African students to be able to reach to those opportunities and be part of those networks. And that matters. It matters in how the world works. It matters in how Africa is seen, in how people interact with people of African descent, right? Because we really have to change that. And we change that by all of us who are ambassadors of Africa being able to realize our potential and not always being lower than, asking for, begging, requesting. We can be equals. And I think education is an equalizer. And I'm so excited to be working in that space. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. And I love that you say that education is actually an equalizer. So what I'm actually also picking up from this conversation is that what is actually missing is access to global knowledge, which would be able to elevate the status of either young people or even entrepreneurs, because then they would actually have advanced knowledge in entrepreneurship, right?
So I think you're right that knowledge is a piece of it. And in my view, so what do I want? I believe in a symphony of solutions. I don't think there is one solution. I don't think that just by solving access to global universities, which is what I'm working on, that's just one lane of a multifaceted space that is called education. We need primary education and literacy and secondary education and quality universities at home and more universities, because we have more people than spaces in many of our universities on the African continent. We need all that. And we also need as many Africans as get the opportunity to accessing the 900-year legacy of Oxford University. It's going to take us a while to build our Oxfords on the continent. So in the meantime, while we're building those, and we should be building those, let's get as many Africans who can get those opportunities to take advantage of that infrastructure, and to every other global university that has the incredible set of resources that they have for our students and our future ecosystem builders to take advantage of. Now, while that is happening, education is one slice of it, but the other is just the network. It is the relationships. And we know that that is everything. I know you have another, we will talk about entrepreneurship a little bit later. And there, I think the critical thing that Emmanuel and people who are building important things on the continent need is access to capital. And access to capital, for better or worse, whether we like it or not, in large volumes, comes from relationships. It comes from networks and from contacts. So we need to just have Africa be part of the world. And I think, the education is part of it, but the networking is such an important part of it as well, Esther.
All right, thank you very much, Lydia. I think you have actually given us from the perspective of education. Emmanuel, you describe entrepreneurship as a lonely journey. Why would you say that? Why would you describe entrepreneurship as a lonely journey? What really was your experience from what you expected it to be to the reality of what you actually eventually got to see?
All right, thank you, Esther. That's a good question to ask. I'm going to try as much as possible to respond to it. So first of all, when you are employed, you have a good job that earns your salary. And I think in Lydia's speech, she has mentioned that it's such a difficult decision to leave a job that is well paying, because not even your parents will approve of it. So that already shows you the level of risk that you get into. Now, if it's not your parent, your close family, then the people who will actually drop you because they think now you're a risk to them, or probably you're going to need to borrow money here, borrow money there, and never be able to pay it back, because I mean, it's an uphill task, mostly at the start. So that in its sense actually is the beginning of the lonely journey that happens, because then you leave a well-paying job, and the first thing that happens is you lose some of the friends that you think would be part of your journey into something you do not really know or what it would turn into. But really, the process of making a decision to start a business, for instance, has to be driven by your convictions, your personal convictions. People will tell you not to do whatever you want to do, but that should never be the reason why you stop. Because then if you have made proper considerations with regards to what you want to do or what you want to pursue, then you go for it. You test it first and see if it works or not. And so then it becomes a journey of self-conviction. And once you believe in the vision of what you're doing and you have your objectives straight, then you go for it. So that basically is the journey that entrepreneurship is. That people will think that whatever you're doing is not going to make a difference. But let me say this, as opposed to what is happening right now, probably a good part of Africa, where a lot of young people do not have employment, whether in the private sector or in the public sector, there's the temptation to divert attention towards entrepreneurship. I'd like to say that it must not be a simplistic ideology of job creation. Entrepreneurship is solution creation. You actually tackle challenges out of entrepreneurship. I know right now as it is, work or job opportunities is a challenge in itself. And so there are a lot of job work or employment agencies that are coming up to just help plug that particular space in the industry. But as it is, entrepreneurship cannot be a solution to joblessness in a sense. However, it eventually becomes a solution to joblessness, but that cannot be the driving force towards entrepreneurship, because you're going to drop it. It's going to be so tough, you're going to drop it as soon as you hit rocks. You're going to drop it. So therefore, you have to be very convinced about what it is that you're doing, what solution you're providing, what challenge you're tackling. And then now we address the bigger concern of, are we being useful to the bigger ecosystem of providing solutions to whichever environment you are in.
Mm-hmm. All right, Emmanuel, I hear what you're saying, that entrepreneurship shouldn't just be, you don't refer young people into entrepreneurship because there's no opportunities for employment, but it could actually be that you have a solution to a certain problem that exists, and not necessarily just out of doing entrepreneurship for lack of opportunities. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So there has to be a reason. There has to be an impetus. There has to be something that pushes you to do whatever you're doing. If you choose to follow a professional life, then there has to be a very good reason why. Something that makes you kick the sheets in the morning and get out there to keep doing it. That is the same thing. If you're solving a problem and you're passionate about solving a problem, more often than not, you will surmount challenges than if you're interested in earning a living from it. The reason I say this is, you will start a business today and you will not have cash flow. You will not have money in your pocket. Of course, the business is running, but this business is supposed to, according to your expectation, is supposed to support your livelihood. What happens? Then you drop it because it's not supporting your livelihood. Now, if solving a problem is not your vision or your objective for starting a business, then you lose it in the process of trying to get yourself comfortable. And so that is the reason why it is very important to be able to anchor properly towards entrepreneurship.
All right. Same as what Dr. Lydia said, that her solution, her entrepreneurship journey comes from a pain point. You saw evidence that many people, I mean, your own father actually wanted to further his studies, but because there's no funding or there's no access to capital, then you thought, why not start something? Because even you have actually experienced lack of funding in your own journey. And is that the one thing that has kept you on? Have you had tough times even in your entrepreneurship journey in pursuing this? What has been some of your greatest challenges that you've had to overcome as an entrepreneur?
So I've gone through these particular challenges. In fact, the first challenge that you meet when you start a business is you expect that your closest friends will be the ones to give you the first business. It doesn't happen. You look into now begin knocking doors without your network, trying to find business. Now the process it requires the most amount of discipline. For you to be able to make a successful entrepreneurship journey, then you have in yourself have to change to align to the dictates of what the business requires. So you have to be extremely disciplined. You have to change your perception about failure, particularly because you will fall a number of times. You'll be disappointed a number of times. The people who will you'll expect business from, and they will never give you the business, but you stand up and move on. So the thing is, I still see the challenge around me. In fact, the challenge grows by the day. There are a lot of people. This year alone in Kenya, I think about 30,000 graduates from campus who just graduated this past month. There has been cumulative numbers of young people who get out of campus, and the first thing they do is they look for a job. It's normal, it's okay to look for a job. And then bit by bit, you realize that these opportunities don't come easy. And then you begin looking for, what can I put my hands on that can bring in money? Now, most of these businesses stand a chance, really. And if we realize that the business ideas stand a chance and we see that there's a gap in the market that spells demand, and there's a proper way or system that we can create towards solving that problem sustainably, then we pick that particular idea and give it an image, an entity. And then we begin working on the systems towards delivering on number one, looking good, and number two, meaning good for whatever society and challenges that exist. And so over the years, as we have done this, our work is a lot of, we're in the service industry. So our work is a lot of a thing of the mind. So we think for you, we put together things, and then we begin on a journey where we all make money. So if it's a good idea, then we invest our minds and the skills that we have, and we say, this is the path that you need to take. The moment you begin making money, we have a percentage. So that becomes the agency fee that we charge in most cases, especially for very young organizations. Of course, over time, as you start out, there's the aspect of angel capital. You have a few friends and family who will give you money here and there. The idea usually is to find the shortest path to returns while creating the value. And so you quickly, I think businesses locally quickly understand their businesses as far as their strengths are concerned. You know what your cash cow is, you know what brings you in the money, and you focus on that. Sometimes what has happened in most cases is we have diversified as a young company. So there are things that you can do. For instance, you have a company that does service as in the service industry, but you need money to keep running the organization. You need to pay salaries, you need to pay utilities, you need to employ staff. That what has happened sometimes is we get into spaces like trading, source and sink. You buy here, sell there, and you make a margin. And so the diversification angle of this keeps you going, keeps some money flowing. So you diversify your revenue earning centers within the organization, within your capability. And that is the idea around entrepreneurship. It needs extreme dynamism to be able to go around some of these issues. Some of the challenges, the common challenges that you meet as a young entrepreneur is, number one, the capital issues. Number two, there is hiring issues, just finding the right people to work for you and do what you want done and deliver on promises. Number three, you will have a lot of regulatory issues. And so you need to understand the regulatory environment in which you are. You have to respect your revenue authorities. You have to respect your local authorities. Otherwise, in a very short period of time, you go down. Why? Because you haven't paid for a license, for instance, or you haven't responded to your revenue authorities in terms of tax obligations. And so some of those things are very critical in starting. Otherwise, you don't have a chance to move on. And sometimes the idea is good, but the taxman comes knocking and you can't get yourself out of the hole.
Wow. Is that the reason why majority of businesses do not actually succeed and very few people actually still remain as entrepreneurs, as everybody carries their CV and goes back to work?
I think there are a number of reasons why a lot of businesses do not succeed or do not realize their objectives. And some of the reasons I've mentioned. However, I think the key challenge that exists is people do not take time to consider some of these challenges so that they can avoid the pitfalls. And that is very important to us as companies who've been in the business for a while and having an opportunity to mentor some younger organizations. You need to have some sort of stamina before you start a business. It is okay to be a risk taker, and you can flip off the edge and roll as much as you can. Chances you will survive, but there's a bigger chance you will hit your head against a rock, and there's no surviving that. So you'd rather learn your path. Now, when we started, I talked about having an experience which I did, working for other people. So when you work for other people, remember, you don't have risks. You don't take the same risks as the owner of the business. So you have resources to learn within the process. Number two, you get to create networks at that particular level that will help you, or you can hang on when those times come about. And then you simply begin to develop ideas, learn how not to run businesses, learn how to run businesses, get a few contacts of people you would want, who will be your first clients for whatever idea that you want. Look at it from that particular perspective. If you have 1, 2, 3 clients, do you think you can stand on your own in terms of revenue expectations? So those are the things that time and experience allows you, that without which it becomes a problem to start. And so if you just jump into it, then it becomes a problem to keep running. You run out of breath too fast. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Emmanuel, for that. I have picked up quite a few points, quite a lot of points. Capital, hiring issues, regulatory issues are some of the things that can ensure that you keep staying at the game and you're not thrown out of the game. Lydia, you clearly have survived and you're still in the game and you're still in the race. And we are constantly talking about hard work. A lot of times it says that it's hard work leads you to success. And we have seen a lot of very hardworking people getting into entrepreneurship and still not sticking around in the game. Either from your experience, what has helped you stay on, or if it's not hard work that keeps people staying, what else do you think keeps people staying in the game? You yourself, especially.
No, thank you so much. And I really want to reiterate the point that Emmanuel has made about stamina, the grit that a person entering this space needs. They don't teach you that in school. You have it or you don't, right? And you realize as you are facing one challenge after another, that it is a stamina game. It is a marathon, and mile 26 isn't always where you think it's going to be. It's probably a little bit further out. But to the specific question of, is it hard work that leads to success? I think hard work is a given. It is the basic of, it's like the ABC of what you have to be doing, but it's actually not sufficient. It is not sufficient. It is necessary, but it is not sufficient. What is also required is what some people call, people talk about the network deficit that leads good ideas by hardworking people that have gone some degree down the road to not survive, because you simply need the capital. You just do. You can't hard work your way out of needing capital. You need it. So you either have sources to it, and what you can do, what the hard work can help you do, is to expand your funnel a lot, right? So some people will need to make 5 asks to get 1 yes. Some people will need to make 100 asks to get 1 yes. And some people will need to ask to have more asks to get to those yeses. So hard work is just the basic step that one needs, but there's a lot more that will be required there. And I think the biggest challenge, and I'm looking at the charts, one of the persons there was talking about, linking African youth to capital. That is absolutely essential. And whatever steps are required to enable African businesses to be able to access global capital, those steps need to be taken, because you don't become a scalable, more than a few people company if you cannot get the capital to get there. So I think the thing that I will throw there is capital. But the other thing that I'll throw in there, Esther, is just luck, serendipity. And I have been a very lucky person. I started by telling you the lotteries that I have won, that I can't explain away by hard luck, by hard work, because there are people who work just as much and did just as well in the case of the scholarships, who, if there is one scholarship and 100 smart kids, there is one scholarship and 100 smart kids. There is no way to hard work out of that. That's just going to be, let's close our eyes and see who has the brightest smile when we open our eyes, and that's the person who is going to get this, right? So that luck piece, the advice I would give, and that I keep taking myself all the time, is to expand the opportunities for serendipity, the opportunities for luck finding you, being out there in the places where you never quite know who might hear what you're building that might resonate to them. And that person themselves might not be the one who knows how to be helpful, but by 3 steps removed, might know someone who can be helpful. So I find that as I venture further down this path where people will listen to what I'm saying, not because I have the brand of a multilateral organization behind me, but because I'm really convinced and passionate about it. I find that as I go further and further down that road, it is really important to not just do networking as a 9 to 5 activity, but all around the clock. I am always interested in what is the next person building? Can I be helpful? Because you never know how someone else can be helpful. So I think those, the hard work is essential. The capital is absolutely necessary, and the luck and whatever you can do to engineer more and more opportunities for luck finding you. Those are things that I think, African entrepreneurs ought to be keeping in mind.
I love that, especially when you say, how can we expand more opportunities for more people to get lucky? Isn't that amazing? I'm going to be taking questions from everyone just on the chat so that we can continue with this conversation, because I know I'm seeing someone, Emmanuel, saying, give me 5 minutes. Should we do that? We have.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay.
Well, my name is Emmanuel.
Okay, sorry.
I'm calling from Nigeria. Good afternoon. My name is Emmanuel. I'm calling from Nigeria. I want to make a little contribution on this was on the moment. I've been from Nigeria, and I work with the international organization, currently working with the SDG, and where we work on the investment program. What's interesting about the entrepreneurship skill is not just looking at the capital or what you. Can we actually look at the technology aspect?
Emmanuel, we're struggling to hear you. Is it possible that you could write it on the chat, please? All right, guys, are there any questions from the audience, participants?
All right. Can I just address something that I saw on the charts, and it's about capital. Capital is extremely critical, just like Lydia has mentioned, among other things. And the challenge that a lot of African entrepreneurs or small business owners face is the ability to be able to, especially have running capital for their businesses. There's a thing about cash flows in business that either keeps you going or kills you. It's simple. You're a small business, you're reaching out. And when you're small, you really reach out hard. So you look for this business, and you need about 3 million shillings, Kenyan shillings. That's about $30,000 to deliver the business. You're young, you do not know where to get that money from. You ask a few places, a few friends here and there, if you're lucky to have such contacts, and they cannot grant you the money. No angel capital available. You go to banking institutions and you do not have cash flows to guarantee you such an amount of money. You do not have an opportunity with a credit line with any bank. Same thing, no cash flows. So what do? So at that particular point, you see an opportunity slipping right through your fingers because you cannot raise the requisite capital to be able to service this business in order to make a profit out of it. And that stifles growth. So there's in business, small businesses, there's something called business viability. The businesses or orders that you will pick, and they will not mean growth. Why? Because they cannot service themselves and pay you extra to make that next step. And so you lose within that space. That is the huge difference between the African space and whoever is doing business, say for instance, in the US, where you will have enough capital, enough investors putting money into your idea, enough for you to risk or even test ideas. And so it makes it even more challenging for African entrepreneurs to test or to pilot their ideas so that they can prove that it actually works. Before you begin to scale a business, then it's important that you understand that the business works, that if it's a service, then the service is delivered to a client's expectations or beyond the client's expectations, and that you're able to make money out of it. Can you commercialize it, the service in itself? And so there's very slight opportunity. So you realize that there are very few investors or venture capitalists who are keen to give money for such runs in Africa. And so that is something that is a challenge here. It still remains to be a challenge, but then it's also an opportunity in itself. And so a lot of young people that I see here have to be almost as accurate about their ideas as though it's a business already. You know that you work around an idea until you know when you put it out into the market, then it is able to earn and it grows organically. And so, and now the idea is the context. So the context of business, which a number of organizations do not understand, especially even the organizations that offer money for growth of businesses or for startups, they do not understand that the same metrics that they use for analysis of other businesses cannot be the same metrics that they use in all environments. And so we are looking at a situation where if only we could have a few people who are willing to learn with the young entrepreneurs and contextualize the support in different environments so that they give, because there's a lot of barrier to capital access. Of course, you'll be told you have a business plan. Sometimes you do not even, a lot of young people in Africa do not even have money to go and print out a business plan. Sometimes you do not have money to sit at a machine like I am now and type and work on a proposal. But you have the idea in your mind and you're sure it can work. You probably put it on a written paper and you know it can work because you've interacted. Some of the businesses that we do in Africa are indigenous businesses. They are actually come out of the environments that we live in. If it's a challenge, you experience something which is a challenge and you want to resolve it. So the cutthroat, the barriers that are laid out for funding for some of the small businesses, I think needs to be in consideration of the contextual environments in which all the businesses run. I think that is very critical, especially for people who are willing
it is actually,
to put money into some of these small businesses.
Mm-hmm. So what we need is more money. We need to be able to take a chance, to be able to risk, to give us time to invest in our ideas, which is really, really lacking in the African space, right? So quickly, the one question that was just shared on the group before I just, in 1 minute before I hand it to Lara, Lydia, I'd like you to answer that question in 1 minute. What can TVET and vocational education around Africa do to help entrepreneurs?
So I am all for people being skilled and being equipped to be able to bring their best selves to the problem they're looking to solve. So I'm more agnostic about whether that is TVET or that is a degree in a local university. It doesn't actually, at a basic level, that equipping is absolutely essential. I am less excited when we have a rather dogmatic approach to, oh, young people need, you know, this training and the other training. And a lot of the time that training makes us feel good. By us, I mean external actors, that we're doing something to address young Africans' needs, as opposed to actually getting to the bottom of what Emmanuel is saying, which is, do you understand the context of how flexible your capital needs to be to help an African entrepreneur to be able to go to the next step? We get that training activity to stand in place of the capital and the harder things we need to be doing. And we kind of need to stop doing that.
All right, you just hit it right, the nail right on the head, right? And today we promise to be clear, raw, and unedited. And I guess we have been, right? So I'll just hand over to Lara, who's smiling at me right now.
Thank you,
Lara,
guys.
take it away.
Thank you so much, Es, for your amazing moderation, and Lydia and Emmanuel for being here with us today and inspiring us. I could listen to entrepreneurs all day, every day. And I said at the beginning of this session that this was our last one on entrepreneurship, and I lied. There's one more next month, which is in partnership with the gender community of practice. And so they're recruiting some speakers that are women entrepreneurs and that are dealing with women's issues. There's a woman dealing with menstruation in a rural context. So that is on May 19th of next month. Now, there's another really important thing I wanted to announce right now. This community of practice is for you guys. So when we started out, it was me and Jack, and then we sort of moved to having other moderators and other speakers. This does not need to be the Lara and Jack talk show. This is for you guys. And we have a member of the community of practice. His name is Christian Mbanza-Guseruka. He runs the Burundian Center on Innovation and Entrepreneurship. He has asked to organize a small group conversation that will be in French. It is a deep dive into entrepreneurship based on a book that is called Les Chèvres de ma mère. It's about somebody whose mother died and left him some goats, and this concept of selling the goats off for money versus keeping them alive and what it took. And he compared that in a phone call that he did with us to some of what he's seeing around him of donor-supported enterprise projects that are actually giving things away to young people maybe too early. So it's this really tough balance, right? You've got to have access to capital. You've got to have it. But if you have it too soon, or if it's not contextualized, as Emmanuel said, it can actually remove the incentive to do the basic thing that's needed, that is hard work. So how can you have your own session? And we will help you. We will find donors to come to your session. We will find industry experts, whatever you want. All you have to do is tell us in your country, here are the projects that are working to support entrepreneurship. And Christian sent this in, and he actually sent in 3 more, but we didn't have time. It's on us to get them onto the slide yet. But this is all posted on Youth Lead. And we now have for a couple of countries. I think we have DRC, we have Burundi. The Kenyans are supposed to be getting us this, Jack. That's on you and Judith. And there's a couple more. So the idea is you want to have your own session, send us the info on the projects. You do or don't have to actually invite these people. But basically, guys, these are budgets. This is money, okay? This is money that's getting spent to support entrepreneurship in your community. What are they doing? Are they having results? Is it taking the approach that we think makes sense? Kind of a reality check with our entrepreneur community. And that's the concept. So I really hope you all will continue to join in and, you know, come back when you see a topic that is important to you and take the initiative to get a conversation. Like Lydia said, that was her first experience with entrepreneurship, was getting some people together to talk about something. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Jack, you want to just say a word of goodbye?
Yes. Oh, you've said everything, and we are running out of time. I will just remind our members that thank you again for joining us. We have had quite a very wonderful session with our entrepreneurs. And if you want to continue listening to this conversation or continue with the conversation, please register in our community of practice. BEPSE, there's the link. I've been sending the link. please join. And the recording of this webinar will also be posted on the youth on the Community of Practice Forum. So thank you so much, and bye-bye.
Thank you.